Welcome to Reaction on YouTube. I'm joined by Lord Forsyth. We're talking today about the assisted dying bill. Lord Forsyth, Michael Forsyth, you have changed your mind on this subject. Why?
Well, it's partly because I've always been voting against it, and I've always felt rather guilty that I was voting against it, but would quite like to have it for myself. So I felt a bit of a hypocrite about this, and I was influenced really, I suppose, with the arguments about how it might be abused. When my father was dying and in a lot of pain, and I went to see him just before he died, so I said to him, "Look, I'm so sorry that you're suffering so much." And rather to my astonishment, he said, "Well, you're to blame, Michael." And I said, "How am I to blame?" And he said, "Because you and others have consistently voted against the right to die. And, for all the treatments that are available, I am in great pain and I can't actually exit this life as I would like to." And that had quite a powerful effect upon me. And looking at this legislation that's now before the House, which is private members legislation, Baroness Meacher, I mean, it seems to me that the protections are there. I mean, two GPs plus a High Court judge, an interview to establish what the motives are. These are protections. And I'm quite dismayed by the way people are using arguments against this bill, which have got nothing to do with the content of the bill, but to do with other issues.
So the critics of the bill, opponents of this measure, say their concern is that you hear, I've heard a lot down the years, the phrase that it introduces a culture of death, that it puts some sort of obligation or feeling or weight of obligation on those who are near death, or even those who are elderly or disabled, that somehow they feel that their life is devalued, that people are wanting them in some way to shorten it because they're a burden. As you said, that is an argument that you, or an argument similar to that you previously found powerful.
Well, there are two parts to that argument. One is this bill is about people who are terminally ill and are likely to die within 6 months. So the notion that, abuse can take place and that you'll be forced to sort of go because they're after the money or for whatever reason, I don't think that really applies given what this bill actually says. And then the second point is we know that the status quo is extremely cruel because people resort to taking their own lives in ways which are pretty unpleasant. So it's not as if we're in a perfect situation. And then, of course, if it happened to me, I mean, if I got motor neuron disease, I would not want to hang on until I was eventually suffocated and fully conscious of all the bits that were being shut down. I wouldn't want to do that. And in the current position, I go off to Switzerland. I can afford to do that, and people who can afford to do that can do that. But it's a pretty nasty thing to put your family through, to drag them all the way out there, and only some of them are allowed to be present, and then come back in a box. I mean, I believe that people, if at all possible, should be able to die in their own homes. So one of the reasons I've been such a strong supporter of Marie Curie cancer care. I also believe, of course, that we should have proper palliative care and proper hospices and things of that kind. And I've raised a lot of money for both these causes. And I remember Martin Lewis, the broadcaster, former broadcaster, coming to see me. He wrote a book about hospices and persuaded me when I was a health minister to introduce pound for pound funding for hospices. So it's not a choice between palliative care. It's about actually giving people the dignity and the ability to choose how they want to die.
What's the evidence from elsewhere in the world where something similar has been attempted?
Well, there are about 200 million people around the world who do have a right to die, living in countries. There is the suggestion that, oh, well, this is the thin end of the wedge. You agreed this bill and it will be extended. The evidence is not that it's been extended. And of course, there are different systems. And Baroness Meacher's bill actually involves a High Court judge. Now, when the opponents of the bill are saying no one's asked the judges, well, the judges are asked when the medics want to withdraw medical support.
Yeah, understood. And explain to us, to listeners and viewers, how this bill works. I mean, what happens from here? We're talking on the day when there's discussion and debate in the Lords. It's a private members bill. So, what are the chances of this becoming law? It certainly seems to be the case that pressure is building, but is that going to manifest itself realistically, do you think, in a change in the law anytime soon?
Well, I don't know what's going to happen, but I think it's something of a farce, actually, because there are almost 200 people speaking, and you're given 3 minutes to speak, which is just not enough time to deal with something as complex as this. It really isn't. And the opponents of the bill are talking about voting against it on second reading. We never vote against bills in the House on second reading. Second reading is about the general principle. And if there are worries about the degree of protection and so on, that is something you deal at committee stage. So if they do vote against the bill and do vote it down, then that will flush out the fact that basically they're against the principle altogether. And all these arguments that are being put are really smokescreen for a view,
Yeah.
which is that people don't have the right to decide how they die.
And where is the government on all of this?
I don't know. I read in the Telegraph that Boris Johnson had changed his mind. I don't know whether that is true or not, changed his mind to be against it. This sort of thing, I think, the government ought to provide government time for it to be discussed. It's private legislation, that's true, but it's very difficult to take a private bill through the House of Lords and then into the House of Commons where it can be objected by people who are in the minority. And looking at the speakers list, the last time I looked, I think the majority of people speaking are actually in favour of the bill.
Do you think that this is running with the grain of history? I mean, if you look at public opinion, do you think that things are shifting?
I do, and I think there's a lot of nonsense being talked. I mean, Tanya Gray Thompson, whom I have the most enormous respect for, Olympic medalist, great campaigner for disability. I mean, she has been trying to make out that this is some kind of threat to disabled people. It's not about that at all. It's about people who are wanting to die. It's got nothing whatever to do with disability or respect for the disabled in any way.
Michael Forsyth, thank you very much for joining us. If you're not a subscriber to Reaction on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and also like this video. Until next time, thank you very much for listening and watching.
Pleasure.